Most horror happens in the dark, in remote places, somewhere you chose to go. These three people didn't choose anything. They were just doing their jobs. A hospital ward at 3 a.m., a factory floor at midnight, a security gatehouse on the edge of an empty industrial estate. Ordinary places, places most of us have walked past without a second thought. Places that exist in every city and every town in this country, humming quietly through the night while the rest of the world sleeps. The people who work these hours are a particular kind of person. They're used to the dark. They're used to being alone in buildings that feel different when the lights are low and the corridors are empty. They learn the sounds, the creaks, the hums, the particular rhythm of a place when nobody else is in it. And sometimes, rarely, they encounter something that doesn't fit that rhythm, something they can't account for, something they carry home with them at the end of the shift and never quite put down. Tonight I have three of those stories' names changed. Details kept exactly as they were sent to me. It's 2 a.m. Let's begin. Claire is a healthcare assistant. She's worked night shifts on a general medical ward in Leeds for 7 years. Not agency work. The same ward, the same team, the same 4 corridors she knows well enough to walk in the dark. She told me that after 7 years of nights, very little surprises her. She's seen patients pass away. She's been the only person in the room when someone took their last breath. She's dealt with confused patients at 4 a.m., with alarms and emergencies and the particular silence that falls over a ward after something difficult has happened. She told me she's not someone who spooks easily. She sent me this story with a note at the top. It said she had never written it down before, and that the act of writing it down had made it feel more real than she was comfortable with. She said she hoped putting it into words would help her make sense of it. It hasn't. She told me that too. It was a Tuesday in January. The ward was running quietly. 8 patients that night, most of them stable, most of them sleeping. 1 patient on half-hourly observations, the rest on hourly. Claire was the only healthcare assistant on that section of the ward. The nurse in charge was at the station at the far end of the corridor. Claire was doing her 3 a.m. round when she noticed the light above Bay 6 flickering, not flashing urgently, just a slow, irregular flicker, the kind that suggests a loose connection somewhere, a bulb at the end of its life, the kind of thing that gets logged in the maintenance book and dealt with in the morning. She noted it and moved on, finished the rest of the round. All 8 patients checked, all settled, nothing to flag. On her way back, she noticed the Bay 6 light was still flickering. Bay 6 was empty. Had been since the previous afternoon when its occupant, a man in his 70s who'd been on the ward for 6 days, had been transferred to a different unit. The bed had been stripped by the afternoon staff, fresh linen left folded on the mattress ready for the next admission. The curtains were half drawn, the room was as it should be, clean, prepared, waiting. The only things still in there were a plastic chair that sat against the wall in the corner and the monitoring equipment on its stand by the bed. The equipment hadn't been moved yet because there'd been no portering staff available to relocate it that evening. It was switched off. The leads were unplugged, coiled, hanging on the side of the machine. Claire went in to check the light. She pushed through the half-drawn curtain, looked up at the fitting, made a mental note of which bulb was causing the flicker. She'd write it in the book when she got back to the station. She was turning to leave when she saw the chair. It was facing the wrong way. She stood very still for a moment. She told me she was certain of what she'd seen earlier in the evening when she'd passed Bay 6. The chair had been facing the wall, pushed back against it at a slight angle, the way chairs end up when they've just been moved aside and left. She'd noticed it because it looked slightly odd. A chair facing a blank wall. Now it was facing the bed, squarely facing it. As if someone had turned it around and sat down in it to look at where the patient had been. She told herself a colleague must have moved it. There was no other explanation. Someone had come in during the evening, perhaps to retrieve something, and had moved the chair without thinking. She told herself this clearly and firmly. She turned toward the curtain to leave. The monitoring equipment beeped, one single beep. Not an alarm, not the urgent triple tone that signals a problem, not the low battery warning, not any fault indicator she recognized. The specific, clean, single beep that the monitor produces when a patient is connected to it, and it registers their first vital reading. The beep that means, I can see someone. She turned back. The equipment was as it had been, switched off, leads hanging, unplugged, nothing connected to it, nothing that could have caused that sound. The bay was empty. The chair faced the bed. The monitor beeped once into the silence and then was quiet. Claire left. She finished her shift. She wrote the light in the maintenance log, and she did not write anything else. In the morning, she mentioned the beep to the senior nurse. He was a man who had worked nights on that ward for 11 years. He didn't look surprised. He said Bay 6 had a habit. She asked him what he meant. He said some of the longer-serving night staff had over the years quietly requested not to be assigned to Bay 6 after midnight. He had never pushed them to explain why. He respected that there were things people preferred not to put into words. He closed the conversation there. She asked me recently if I thought there was a rational explanation for the chair and the beep. I told her I didn't know. She said she didn't either. And that was the part she found hardest. She still works that ward. She still does nights. She told me she always checks which bay she's been assigned before she starts her shift, just to know. Tony has worked nights at the same manufacturing plant in Birmingham for 18 years. He started there when he was 31 on a temporary contract that became permanent, and he's never left. He knows that factory the way you can only know a place after nearly 2 decades. Every sound it makes, every smell, every degree of light at every hour of the night. He told me that working nights at a factory teaches you to read a building. You learn what normal sounds like. You learn what quiet sounds like. And you develop, over time, a very precise instinct for when something is wrong. He told me he has never been frightened by the factory. This is the story of the one night that changed that. The plant runs a reduced crew overnight. During the day, there are 40-odd people on the floor, noise, movement, the constant rhythm of a busy production line. At night, there are 4. Tony and 3 colleagues spread across different sections, each responsible for monitoring their area, checking tolerances, logging any irregularities, doing the walkthrough every 2 hours. It's repetitive work, solitary work. Tony told me he came to appreciate that solitude over the years. There's a particular quality to an industrial building at 2 a.m. The machines running at low capacity, the overhead lights dimmed in the sections that aren't active, the vast floor stretching away in both directions. He said it had its own kind of peace. The far end of the factory is the oldest part of the building. It wasn't included in the refurbishment that the rest of the plant went through in 2016. Lower ceilings, older lighting, the fluorescent kind that hums slightly, that takes a few seconds to warm up when you switch it on. A row of older press machines that still run, but at reduced capacity, kept going because replacing them would be expensive, and they still do the job. Tony has done his 2 a.m. walkthrough of the far end hundreds of times. He knows that section better than anywhere else in the building. It was a Wednesday night in March, 4 years ago. He was 45 minutes into his walkthrough, moving through the far section, torch in hand as he always was back there, because the overhead lighting was on its lowest setting at that hour. He was checking the older presses in sequence, noting the readings, same as always. He saw the figure from about 30 meters away. It was lying on the floor between 2 of the older machines, the big horizontal presses near the north wall, the ones that had been there since the factory was built, lying face down, arms at the sides not outstretched, the posture of someone who had collapsed forward or fallen. Tony didn't hesitate. His first thought was medical, a colleague, a collapse, a fall. He ran toward the figure, torch beam bouncing ahead of him across the concrete floor. He got to within 5 meters and stopped. There was nothing there. Not nothing in the sense that the person had moved or scrambled to their feet. Nothing in the sense that the floor between those 2 machines was empty. Concrete. A faint oil stain near the base of one machine. A bolt someone had dropped months ago that had rolled under the press, and nothing else. Tony stood there. He told me he stood there for what felt like a long time, torch pointing at the empty floor, trying to account for what he had just seen. He is not a man given to flights of imagination. 18 years of nights has a way of making you very literal-minded. You deal in what is in front of you. You don't speculate. He had seen something in front of him. Now, there was nothing in front of him. He checked both sides of the machines. He checked behind them, the narrow gap between the press and the wall. He called out once clearly, in case a colleague had somehow ended up in that section and was playing a prank, in case there was some explanation he hadn't thought of. His voice went out flat across the factory floor and came back to him as a slight echo. Nothing moved. Nobody answered. He radioed his colleague on the south side, asked if anyone had come through the far end of the factory in the last 10 minutes. His colleague said no. The external doors in that section were alarmed. Nobody had come in from outside. Tony finished his walkthrough. He went back to his station. He sat down and thought carefully about what he was going to write in the incident log. He wrote it plainly. Believed he had observed a person lying on the floor in the far section, investigated immediately. No person present, no explanation identified, no sign of entry or exit. His supervisor called him in the next morning. Tony sat down across from him, expecting to be told he'd been tired, or that it had been a trick of the light, or that somebody would be having a quiet word about workplace stress. Instead, his supervisor looked at the log for a moment without speaking, and then asked Tony to describe exactly where, in the far section, he had seen the figure. Tony described it. between the two horizontal presses near the north wall, on the floor, face down, arms at the sides. His supervisor was quiet for a moment. Then he told Tony that in 1987, before either of them had worked there had been a fatal industrial accident in that section of the factory. A worker had been killed. A mechanical failure. He'd been found face down on the floor between those two machines, the same machines that were still there, the same spot. Tony went home that morning and slept badly. He told me he still does the 2 a.m. walkthrough. He still goes through the far section. He doesn't avoid it. He said that would feel wrong somehow, like he was acknowledging something he isn't ready to acknowledge. He just doesn't point his torch toward those two machines anymore. He keeps his eyes forward and keeps walking. Mo works nights as a security guard. He covers a business park on the outskirts of Manchester, a cluster of low-rise office buildings and a small industrial unit arranged around a central car park. The whole site enclosed by a perimeter fence with 2 gated entry points. 12-hour shifts, mostly on his own, with a colleague covering the other gate on the larger sites. He's been doing it for 3 years. He told me that people imagine security work to be either boring or dangerous, and that mostly it's neither. It's methodical. You learn the site, you learn the routines, you know which motion sensor trips when a fox cuts across the car park, and which alarm is always slightly oversensitive in cold weather. After a while, Mo said, "You know the site better than you know your own house. You know what it's supposed to look like at every hour of the night." He told me this because he wants me to be clear about something before he gets to the story. He is not someone who jumps at shadows. He is not someone who makes mistakes about what he sees. This happened on a Friday night in October, 8 months ago. Mo arrived for his shift at 10 p.m, signed in at the gatehouse, went through the handover with the outgoing guard, checked the patrol log, standard start to a standard shift. Before the outgoing guard left, Mo checked the electronic clock-in system. It's a fob-based system. Each guard carries a fob that they tap against readers at the gate and at various points around the site. The system logs every entry and exit with a timestamp. It's used for accountability, to show the company that patrols are being done on schedule. Mo checked the system and saw that 2 fobs were currently registered as active on site. One was his. He'd tapped in at the gate 2 minutes earlier. That was correct. The other was registered to a guard called Derek. Clock-in time, 21:47, 13 minutes before Mo had arrived. Mo checked the rota. Derek was not assigned to this site that night. Derek was assigned to a different site across the city, one he regularly covered. And Derek's fob should not have worked on this gate. The fobs are site-specific, programmed to only register at the location each guard is assigned to. There was no technical reason for Derek's fob to have opened this gate, no reason for it to appear in this system at all. Mo called the control center. They confirmed that Derek was accounted for at his own site. He had clocked in there at 9 p.m. His patrol logs were registering correctly throughout the evening. He was physically present at a location 15 miles away. Camera verified. The control center told Mo to do a full walkthrough of the site, every building, every door, every corner. If someone had gained access, whatever the explanation for the fob reading, they needed to know about it. Mo spent 40 minutes walking every inch of that business park, all external doors locked, All internal areas secure. No sign of forced entry anywhere on the perimeter. No sign of anyone on the site at all. He filed his report. Unexplained fob registration. Site checked and secure. No person found. At midnight, Mo was doing his second patrol of the main office block. He was on the second floor, working his way along the corridor, trying the handle of each office door in sequence the way he always did. Rain on the windows, the particular silence of an empty building at night. His radio crackled. It was the control center. Their voice was careful and level in the way that trained people are careful and level when something has unsettled them. They told Mo that the clock-in system had just registered Derek's fob again. Exit 2358. Mo went immediately to the east pedestrian gate. It was the gate the system had logged the exit from. He got there in under 3 minutes. The gate log confirmed it. Fob registered. Gate mechanism activated. Exit recorded at 2358. He pulled up the camera footage for the east gate. He watched the recording from 2357 to 2359. At 2358, the gate opened. The mechanism engaged. The gate swung outward, held for 4 seconds, then swung closed again. Nothing walked through it, no person, no shadow, no shape at all. The gate opened and closed, and the camera showed only the empty path beyond, the wet concrete, the perimeter fence, the dark street beyond. Mo stood at that gate for a while. He told me he's not sure exactly how long. He said the rain was still coming down and he stood there getting wet and looking at the gate and trying to find a framework for what he'd just seen that made any sense at all. He filed his report. He finished his shift. He said very little about it to anyone for several months. When he did eventually start asking questions, he found a planning document from 2009 relating to the business park's development. It referenced the prior use of the land. Before it was a business park, it had been a residential street, a small terrace of 8 houses demolished in 2004 to make way for the development. Most of the residents had been rehoused without complication. One had not left willingly. A man who had lived in the same house on that street for 40 years. He had challenged the compulsory purchase. He had lost. He had died in his home 6 months before the demolition, before he ever had to leave. A neighbor found him. His name was Derek. Mo still works that site. He told me he checks the clock-in system every single night when he arrives. He looks at the screen carefully before he does anything else, just to make sure it's showing one name, just to make sure it's only his. 3 stories, 3 ordinary workplaces, 3 people who went to work expecting a normal shift and came home carrying something they've never been able to put down. I think about these people often. Claire checking her bay number before every shift, Tony keeping his torch pointed forward, Mo looking at that screen every single night. There's something about the night shift that strips away the things we usually use to reassure ourselves. The daylight, the noise, the presence of other people going about their ordinary lives. On the night shift, it's just you and the building and whatever the building holds. Most nights, that's nothing. But some nights, it isn't. Every week, new stories arrive in my inbox. People who work these hours, who are awake in these places, who have seen or heard or felt something they have no explanation for and no one to tell. Next week's video is already taking shape. And I will tell you honestly, one of the stories I've been sent this week I've read 4 times now, and I still don't know what to make of it. If you want to hear it, subscribe now and turn on notifications. I post every week, without fail. Miss a week and you might miss the one that keeps you up. And if something has happened to you on a night shift in an empty building at an hour when you shouldn't have seen what you saw, send it to me. The email is in the description. Your name will be changed, your story will be heard. I'll be here next week. Try to get some sleep.